What is the true story behind retirement in America? Stay with me. So, right now, baby boomers are retiring. Baby boomers are a cohort of people anywhere from age 60 to age 79, and they represent a huge segment of the US demographics. The average American at retirement has 273,000 in a retirement account. And we scratch our heads and wonder, how can people retire with $273,000 in a retirement account and that's it? It's a much more complicated picture for the baby boomers, and I'm going to outline what some of those complications are. First, a lot of baby boomers are married and stay married. Retirement planning for two is a lot easier than retirement planning for one. You have two social securities, potentially two retirement accounts. So that 273,000 figure, if you have a wife with 273,000 and a husband with 273,000, well then you have over 500,000 and you can really do something with that number. So it's much more complicated than just having 273,000 in a retirement account. You're often looking at two social securities, maybe one or both partners also has a pension. And in addition to that, people may have additional assets like a home, a paid for home. So that's one of the first complications. Second complication with that number is that the 273,000 is only looking at retirement accounts. A lot of people don't save for retirement in retirement accounts. Reason being, they may not have access to a retirement account at work. They may not understand how retirement account functions. Maybe their employer doesn't match them. I've encountered some people who just don't use retirement accounts at all because they don't like the tax implications of certain 401ks and IRA accounts. What do they use for retirement savings? Some people just used a regular savings account. They put the money away in savings or in a CD. And why did they do that? They're typically very risk averse and they understand how CDs or treasuries work. And so they're confident investing their money into a savings account in a CD structure or in treasuries. Now there's big problems with that, but there are a segment of Americans that use savings accounts for retirement. Another segment of Americans will use individual brokerage accounts or joint brokerage accounts. So a joint brokerage account is an account in your individual name. You can take out the money at any time after putting it in, but you will have to pay capital gains on the gains on those investments. Well, why do people use brokerage accounts? Because they can access the money before 59 and a half without penalty. They can also access it for emergencies and different crises that come up in life, where if the money is in a 401k or IRA, they may not have that luxury. Another consideration that changes the way we look at retirement in America is, well, people may have multiple retirement accounts across multiple different organizations. Sometimes people don't consolidate all of their retirement accounts. And when someone says, okay, the average retirement account has $273,000, well, but and the person may have three other retirement accounts with Fidelity, Ameriprise, and Morgan Stanley that isn't being counted in the figure. So when you take all of that information and you take a few more bits of information, retirement planning and the status of retirement right now in America is very complicated. But I also want to talk about the future of retirement and why I am so concerned for Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Zers. First, fewer Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Zers are going into retirement married. Fewer people are getting married and fewer people are staying married. When you have to do retirement planning for one person, it gets complicated. It's really hard to meet the numbers for savings and also for spendings when you don't have the power of two. So a lot of people in generations younger than baby boomers are going to struggle with retirement planning or in retirement simply because they are single. The second thing that really concerns me about the future of retirement planning is basically the eradications of pensions. About 50% of baby boomers have access to a pension. So if you have a husband and wife, odds are one of them has a pension, either the husband or the wife. 14%, 14% of Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Zers have access to a pension. And there's no guarantee what state that pension will be in when that individual retires. So, something that really, really concerns me about retirement for future generations is the eradication of the pension system. Third thing that really concerns me is longevity risk. Now, baby boomers are enjoying some of the highest life expectancies we've experienced in America. Life expectancy continues to grow. It's one thing to plan a retirement around dying at age 80. It's another thing to plan a retirement around dying at age 95. It's really hard to pull off 30 years without working, without income, and have enough savings to float you. But that's exactly what we're asking people to do if we're planning to keep the average retirement age at about 65 and the average life expectancy continues to grow up. And for some people, it may be in the 90s. So extending life expectancies for future generations really, really concerns me. Next, devaluation of the US dollars. Every 25 years, at 3% inflation, the value of the dollar for purchasing power cuts in half. It's one thing if you're going to retire and you may live another 15 years. It's another thing if you're trying to retire early and you realistically could live another 50 years and you have to go through two cycles of devaluation of the dollar. If you think about it, let's say you have $1 million and you're age 50 and you retire and you have a good fortune of living to 100. With 3% inflation, if you don't spend a dime of it, in 50 years' time, that $1 million will have the purchasing power of about $250,000 today, and that's pretty scary. So I'm going to switch over to my computer and I'm going to show you the numbers of how to end up with a regular, quote, retirement of $273,000. So how does a person end up with only $273,000 in a retirement account? And it's a question, it's a loaded question that lands different for each generation. You ask that question of someone in the silent generation or even some of the older baby boomers, and they'll sometimes respond, I never thought I would ever see $273,000 in my entire lifetime. That is more than enough. That is a king's ransom for retirement. You ask the same question of a young millennial or a Gen Zer, and they're like, oh my God, who can retire on $273,000? That's nothing for retirement. And it's very interesting to see the different responses across the generation about how much money they think they will need for retirement savings. And I think what people don't understand is that people subconsciously understand inflation, especially since we have come off a round of recent steep inflation here in the United States. And the millennials and the Gen Zers are factoring in their minds inflation for the future. So while someone who is 75 may think $273,000 is fantastic and more than enough to live on, someone who is a Gen Zer and just starting out thinks that someone should be making $273,000 a year because the Gen Zer knows that they have another bare minimum 50, 60 years on this planet, and they're going to have to contend with inflation and spikes in inflation when planning out the future usage and investments of their money. So that's why you'll get wildly different answers in retirement planning and saving across the different generations, with baby boomers and with silent generation being more fixed as current today's dollars, where Gen Zers seem like they're coming at it from outer space because the numbers they come up with are so fantastically large. They don't really bear any relation to the cost of living today. They're projecting the cost of living 50, 60 years from now. And you know what? They may actually be right. So let's walk through the numbers and talk about how does someone end up with $273,000 in retirement savings. Um, this is probably in more alignment with what the regular, average, everyday American has an experience saving for retirement. Remember, over 40% of Americans do not have access to a 401k. There's more Americans who have access, but who don't have matches. So we're already starting with a majority either don't have access to a 401k or don't have access to a 401k with a match, which is a pretty bad part to start off with. So the individual is left to their own devices to save for retirement. Now, the median salary in the United States is almost $60,000, which maybe prior to 2019, you really could carve out a decent living with $60,000. But due to the recent round of inflation over the past 5 years, that $60,000 really doesn't bear a strong relation to the reality of the cost of living now, which is problematic. Okay, so I'm using historical returns over the last 20 years. Of course, the returns in the future are different. These numbers will be different. I'm starting this person retirement savings at 45. Now, for millennials and for Gen Zers, the average age to start saving for retirement is now 31. And that is a very good number. They're starting younger than any other generation has before them to save for retirement. Why is that? Because of the demise of pension, because of the spotlight on Social Security. They're feeling the winds and they're feeling that retirement is largely going to be left up to them, and they're making provisions to move forward. So, for older Americans that had access to pension, who were secure in Social Security, they waited a little bit longer. And this individual, unfortunately, waited till age 45. Now, getting started is what the most important point is. And I want to really emphasize that. If you are watching this video and you're 40s and you're just getting started, that is fine. But ideally, this person would have started 20 years ago. But the reality in the American experience is it just doesn't happen that way. Some people get super late starts in retirement. Okay. So we're going to start this person starting in their 40s, contributing for retirement. So this is the way that a lot of Americans do contributions for retirement, especially if they don't have a 401k, especially if they don't have a match from their employer. Okay, so at age 45, they put in $5,000. That's close to 10% of a $6,000 a year, $60,000 a year salary. Maybe the next year they're able to put away $5,000. Then something happens in 2026. Their kid gets ill. Their something with their home. The hot water heater goes out. A car needs to be replaced. A big dental bill, and they're not able to contribute anything for the entire year in 2026. Then in 2027 they come back and they contribute maybe 3,000 that year. Then the next year they can contribute 2,000. Then in 2029 they're back at 5,000. So my point in showing you this is a lot of my retirement projections often shows people going full throttle all the way through to retirement, pedal to the metal. That isn't the reality of many Americans' experience. They save some years, they don't save some years. They're able to save a lot this year, they're not able to save a lot the next year. It's very herky-jerky and kind of back and forth. And it's not that this person doesn't know that retirement planning is important. It's just that life gets in the way. And when your salary is now $60,000, when we've experienced 20% inflation between 2019 and 2024, there's just more opportunities for life just to get into the way. So the person continues on this way, a couple of thousand here, a couple of thousand there. They're earning a little bit more money here, so they put a little bit more money, away. They have some zero on some years because big things happen and they just can't afford to do it. And, in their final years, this is where they get serious at about age 60 because they're in the end game at this point. They pretty much max out at age 60 going forward to 64. And then this person comes in and let's look at the account balances. Okay. So you see, ultimately, by the time they're 64, if they kind of follow this in out, contribute, don't contribute plan, they have about $278,000. And typically at this point in their early 60s, they come to a financial advisor and they say, hey, I want to retire. I have this much in a retirement account. I have this much in Social Security. How can we make it work? And, as a financial advisor, it's challenging to make it work because oftentimes especially here in California, there's going to be compromises that need to be made in order to make this retirement plan work. If I'm sitting down and a person brings in 278,000, one of the first questions I'm asking is, do you own your home? Where do you live? Is your home paid off? Do you have any debt? Would you be open to an adventure or moving or relocating? With this amount in a retirement account and Social Security as the individual's only retirement plan, the more adventurous and open to opportunity the person is, the easier it is to plan out a retirement that works. An example of an adventurous retirement would be, okay, so this person, we're going to try to hold off on this person getting Social Security until 67 or age 70. If the person can work remotely, would they be interested potentially in going to Mexico for a few years, learning Spanish, pursuing some interest there, lowering their living costs substantially, and taking that money that they're earning and socking it away in a brokerage account or in a retirement account to really beef up their savings leading up to age 70? And when they're 70, they can come back to the US, collect their Social Security. They'll have more money in the investments and the retirement account, and we can figure out a way to design a comfortable retirement for them. So that's like a creative solution to come up with to keep this person in the US for their retirement, but to build in an adventure and to beef up the retirement savings leading up to their eventual retirement. It's really difficult when I get someone who is in my office, they're 64 and they're like, no, I'm going to retire at 65. I want to retire at 65. And then you're like, well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm a financial advisor, not a magician. It's going to be tight. It's going to be a retirement of compromise, especially if you want to stay here in California, especially if you want to stay here in the Bay Area. And then we have to kind of work through the numbers to show them exactly how tight it is. And then the person can say yay or nay whether retirement works out for them. But there you have it. This is more common, the regular American experience, where some years you're contributing, some years you're not. Some years you're able to do a lot, some years you're not. And then you end up with about 270,000-ish in a retirement account. And you're on par with what most Americans have. But oftentimes, especially for Gen Xers, Millennials, and Gen Zers, this is definitely going to be a retirement of compromise. And the more open and flexible you can be, the better we can be at designing around that compromise. In my next video, I'm going to do a budget with the $270,000 and Social Security and show you just exactly how tight that is. I'm going to switch back over to my camera and make a few final comments. A lot of comments I receive are complaints from people that a lot of the work I do is with high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals, and I really don't do kind of regular retirement planning. I do have clients in my book who are like my bread and butter clients who I love dearly, who I do basic retirement and planning around. I did hold on to those clients when I made the jump to wealth management. But this is how I started my career, working with average people with average sums of money who wanted a fair rate of return and have worked their lives for that $270,000 and wanted it respected, protected, and wanted it to grow. And I really respect those Americans. It's hard saving money in America, especially now that we've had the recent round of inflation. I don't think anyone should feel any kind of way about building up $270,000 for retirement savings. It represents quite an accomplishment. So there you have it. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. And if you found this information useful, please like, share, and subscribe.